She hit play on her laptop, turned the screen toward me, and said, "This one. This is the one I want to walk down the aisle to." I recognized the opening chords before the first lyric even started because I was the one who'd put that song on the playlist in the first place, 6 years before she ever met the man she was about to marry. My name is Ethan Marsh. I'm 31, I teach high school history, and up until that Sunday afternoon in her apartment, surrounded by 3 different bridal magazines and a laptop full of half-finished Spotify playlists, I would have told you that helping my best friend plan her wedding was the easiest, most uncomplicated job in the world. I was wrong about that, but I didn't know it yet. Lily Hartman and I met in a dorm hallway during our first week of college. Both of us locked out of our rooms at the same time because neither of us had figured out the key fob system yet. We sat on the floor of that hallway for 2 hours waiting for the RA to show up, and by the time he did, we'd already exchanged enough information to know we were going to be friends for a long time. 4 years of college, a graduation we cried through together, an apartment we shared for 2 years after that before her job moved her across town. None of it ever tipped into anything either of us called romantic, at least not out loud, not in any way either of us was willing to examine too closely. The playlist started our sophomore year. It began as a joke, a shared document of songs we were both embarrassed to admit we liked, and it grew over the years into something neither of us ever formally named, but both of us kept adding to. Songs from road trips. Songs from breakups, hers and mine both. Songs we'd play on repeat during finals week, driving each other slowly insane with the same 4 minutes on loop until one of us finally cracked and changed the track. It had over 300 songs by the time she got engaged, 6 years of a running conversation neither of us had ever needed words for. I remember one specific night junior year, sitting on the roof of our dorm building with 2 cheap speakers and a bottle of wine we'd definitely been too young to be drinking, taking turns adding songs to the list and explaining why each one belonged there. She added one that made her cry a little, something about her mother, and I didn't ask questions, just sat with her until the song ended and she was ready to talk about something else. I added one that reminded me of my dad, gone since I was 14, and she reached over and squeezed my hand without saying anything, which somehow felt like exactly the right response. Neither of us ever talked about that night afterward, but I think some part of the playlist's real meaning got built right there on that roof. 2 people quietly handing each other pieces of themselves through songs instead of speeches. I should say clearly that we both dated other people during those years. I had a girlfriend for almost 2 years named Priya who eventually told me, not unkindly, that she felt like she was competing with a friendship she couldn't quite understand the shape of. She'd found the playlist once, scrolled through it for 20 minutes without saying anything, then asked me quietly why there were so many songs on it that felt like inside jokes she wasn't part of. I told her that was ridiculous at the time, that it was just a fun list 2 friends kept adding to. I've thought about that conversation more since then than I ever expected to. Lily dated a few guys too, nothing that lasted, until she met Connor. Connor was, by any fair measure, a good guy. He worked in commercial real estate. He made her laugh in a way that seemed to genuinely delight him rather than perform for an audience. And he treated her with a steadiness that I recognized, uncomfortably, as something close to what I'd always tried to offer her myself without ever calling it that. I met him for the first time about 8 months into their relationship, and I liked him fine. That's an important detail, because this isn't a story about hating the man she chose. This is a story about a song that made both of us finally say the thing we'd spent 6 years avoiding. When Connor proposed, about a year and a half after they started dating, Lily called me before she called almost anyone else. 11 at night, her voice bright and shaking with excitement in a way I recognized because I'd heard that exact tone from her over 100 small joys across the years. I said all the right things. "I'm so happy for you. He's a great guy. Congratulations, Lil." And then, just before we hung up, she'd gone quiet for a beat and said, almost like an afterthought she hadn't planned to say out loud, "I need you to help me with the wedding. Not just be there. Help me plan it. I trust your taste more than anyone else's." I told myself that request was normal, the kind of thing best friends ask of each other without any complicated weight attached. I spent the better part of a year believing that, right up until the Sunday afternoon with the laptop and the playlist. We'd been meeting most Sundays for months by then, working through the enormous list of decisions a wedding apparently requires. Venue, catering, the seating chart that nearly ended 2 family friendships before Lily diplomatically rearranged 3 tables. Through all of it, I showed up every week with genuine enthusiasm, because that's what a good friend does, and because some part of me, I think, needed to prove to myself that I could do this without it costing me anything. The song question had been hanging over us for weeks. Lily wanted something meaningful for her walk down the aisle, not the generic classical pieces every wedding site recommended, something that actually meant something to her. And she'd been agonizing over the choice with an intensity that seemed disproportionate to a 4-minute song until I understood, later, exactly why it mattered so much to her. I keep coming back to one. She admitted that Sunday, scrolling through a document of contenders she'd built over weeks. But I'm scared to actually pick it, because I think picking it means admitting something I haven't wanted to admit. What song? I asked, genuinely curious, genuinely not expecting what came next. She turned her laptop toward me without answering directly and hit play. The opening chords filled her apartment, familiar in a way that hit my chest before my brain even caught up, because I recognized it instantly. It was a song I'd added to our old shared playlist during our junior year, one we'd played on a drive back from a friend's wedding upstate. Both of us a little drunk on champagne and each other's company, singing along badly in her car with the windows down. It wasn't a wedding song by any conventional definition. It was our song, the kind 2 people build without ever agreeing on what it means, and she was telling me she wanted to walk toward Connor while it played. Lily. My voice came out rougher than I expected. I know, she said quietly, watching my face. I know what I'm doing by picking this one. I've known for weeks, and I kept trying to talk myself into something safer, something that didn't have our whole history wrapped up inside it. But every other song felt like a lie, and I'm so tired of lying to myself about what this song actually means to me. The apartment went very quiet, just the song still playing softly in the background, for minutes of a melody that suddenly felt like it was asking both of us a question neither of us had been brave enough to answer for 6 years. Why the song? I asked carefully, needing to hear her say it rather than assume. She closed the laptop slowly, cutting the music off mid-verse, like she needed the silence to actually say what came next. Because it's the only song that makes me think of you before it makes me think of anything else. Because every time it plays, even now, even engaged to a wonderful man I genuinely love, some part of me goes straight back to that car, singing badly with you, feeling more like myself than I think I've ever felt with anyone since. Lily, you're getting married in 4 months. I know that, she said, and her voice cracked slightly. I'm not saying this to blow anything up. I'm saying it because I've spent 6 years telling myself the feeling I have around you is just what best friendship feels like, and I don't think that's true anymore. And I think some part of me has known it wasn't true for a long time. I sat there absorbing that, my chest tight in a way that had nothing to do with the song still echoing in my head. I felt something too, I admitted slowly, for longer than I've let myself examine. I told myself it was just closeness. I told myself that because the alternative meant admitting I've been standing next to the thing I actually wanted for 6 years and calling it friendship, so I never had to risk losing it. Her eyes filled, but she didn't look away. What do we do with that? I'm engaged, Ethan. The invitations go out next month. I don't know, I said honestly. But I know I'm not going to lie to you about what I feel just to make your wedding easier to plan. You asked me to help you find something true. I think you just did, even if it's inconvenient timing. She sat with that for a long moment, staring at the closed laptop like it held an answer neither of us was ready to look at directly. I have to think, she said finally. Not about you. About me. About whether what I'm feeling is real or whether it's cold feet dressed up as something more meaningful. I owe Connor an honest answer to that question before I owe you anything. That's fair, I said, and I meant it. even though every part of me wanted to push for more clarity right then. I left her apartment that afternoon without resolution, without a plan, carrying a version of our 6-year friendship that suddenly needed an entirely new shape, and neither of us knew yet what that shape would be. The next 2 weeks were some of the hardest waiting I'd ever done. Lily didn't cancel our Sunday planning sessions, but they felt different, careful in a way that hadn't existed between us before, both of us navigating conversations about seating charts while an enormous unspoken question sat at the table with us. I didn't push. I decided this had to be her timeline, not mine. The same way I imagine anyone waiting for someone else to sort out their own heart has to learn patience they didn't know they had. My roommate Marcus, who'd known Lily almost as long as I had, noticed something was off within the first week. "You've been weird since the wedding planning started," he said one night, watching me stare at my phone without actually looking at anything on it. "Lily wants to walk down the aisle to our old playlist song," I admitted, because keeping it inside had started to feel unbearable. Marcus set down the beer he was holding. "The one from junior year? The upstate wedding drive? That one. Ethan." He said my name carefully, the way you say something to someone you think might already know the answer to their own question. "You know what that means, right?" "I think I do. I don't know what to do with it." "You've been in love with that woman since sophomore year," Marcus said, not unkindly, just plainly, the way a good friend tells you something you've been avoiding. "I watched you break up with Priya specifically because Lily called you upset about something and you left in the middle of dinner. I've watched you compare every date you've had since college to whether they made you laugh the way Lily does. I never said anything because it wasn't my business, and because you were both clearly determined to pretend it was just friendship. But if she's telling you the truth about that song, I think the pretending might finally be over." I didn't sleep well after that conversation, running Marcus's words alongside 6 years of memories I'd apparently been filing away without letting myself add them up. Lily called Connor 2 weeks after that Sunday afternoon and told him everything, not because she'd decided anything yet about me, but because she said she couldn't keep planning a wedding while carrying a question that big without being honest with the man she was supposed to be marrying. She told me about that conversation a few days later, sitting on a park bench near her apartment, looking more exhausted than I'd seen her in years. "How did he take it?" I asked. "Better than I expected. Worse than I hoped." She stared out at the pond in front of us. "He asked me if I was in love with you. I told him I honestly didn't know yet, that all I knew for certain was that I couldn't say our wedding vows with a question that big unanswered. He said he'd rather know now than build a marriage around something I couldn't stop wondering about. He's a better man than I probably deserve right now." "He sounds like it," I said. 2 days after that conversation, Connor texted me directly, 3 words. "Can we talk?" I almost didn't answer, then figured a man in his position deserved better than being ignored by the person who'd unintentionally upended his engagement. We met at a coffee shop neither of us usually went to, neutral ground picked deliberately so it wouldn't hold memories either of us needed to protect. Connor looked exhausted in a specific way I recognized, the look of someone who'd been asking himself the same question on a loop for days without landing anywhere solid. "I'm not here to yell at you," he said before he'd even sat down. "Okay," I said carefully. "Lily told me everything. About the song, about what you two said to each other." He turned his coffee cup slowly on the table without drinking from it. "I've spent the last 2 nights trying to work up real anger at you, and it just doesn't come, because you didn't do anything except exist as someone she's clearly loved for a long time before I ever met her. That's not something I can blame you for. I never meant for any of this to happen the way it did," I said. "I believe you," he said. "That's actually the hardest part. If you'd been some guy scheming to steal her out from under me, I could hate you cleanly. Instead, you're just a guy she's had 6 years of history with, and I built a relationship with her partly believing that history was safely behind both of you. Turns out it wasn't as behind you as any of us thought." I didn't know what to say to that, so I offered the only honest thing available. "I'm sorry this is happening to you." "Me too," he said. "But I'd rather know now, before a wedding." Then 5 years into a marriage where I keep wondering why she still lights up a certain way whenever a specific song comes on the radio. He finished his coffee and stood to leave. Take care of her, Ethan. If this is real, actually take care of her, the way you apparently already have been for 6 years without either of you calling it what it was. He left before I could respond, and I sat there for a long while afterward, absorbing the strange, quiet grace of a man who'd lost something significant and still managed to leave me with something like a blessing on his way out the door. The engagement ended quietly about a week later. No dramatic public unraveling, just a mutual, sad acknowledgement between two people who'd built something real but not, as it turned out, built on the right foundation. The wedding venue got a cancellation call. The invitations that had already gone out required an awkward round of follow-up texts that Lily handled with more grace than I think I would have managed in her position. I remember driving her to the venue myself for that final cancellation meeting, sitting in the parking lot afterward while she cried, not for Connor exactly, she was careful to clarify, but for the version of the last 2 years she genuinely believed in while it was happening. I don't regret loving him, she said, wiping her eyes. I just think I finally understand the difference between loving someone and being certain about them. Those aren't the same thing, I agreed. I don't think anyone teaches you that distinction until you're forced to learn it the hard way. Is that what happened with Priya? She asked, glancing at me. You loved her, but you weren't certain? I thought about that honestly before answering. I think I loved the idea of building a normal life with someone. I don't think I was ever certain the way I feel about this, about you, right now, sitting in a parking lot after your engagement just ended. That should probably terrify me more than it does. She managed a small, tired laugh. Welcome to the club. We didn't rush into anything after that, because we both understood that 6 years of friendship and the wreckage of a broken engagement deserved more care than an immediate leap into romance. We took 3 months before either of us called it dating out loud. 3 months of the same Sunday meetings we'd always had. Except now the conversations lingered longer. Now the silences between us felt charged instead of comfortable in the old familiar way. Now I found myself noticing things about her I'd apparently been noticing for years without letting the noticing mean anything. There was a rough week during that stretch that nearly stalled everything. About a month in, Lily pulled back suddenly, shorter texts, a canceled coffee date blamed on work that felt thinner than her usual honesty. I finally asked her directly, sitting across from her at her kitchen table. Did I do something? I asked. No, she said, then paused, choosing her next words carefully. My mom called. She'd heard about Connor from my aunt, and when I mentioned you might be part of the reason, she got quiet in this way that scared me more than if she'd just said something critical outright. It made me wonder if I'm doing exactly what she's worried about, replacing one relationship with the next available one before I've actually sat with what happened. I felt something tighten in my chest, but made myself answer slowly instead of defensively. That's a fair thing to worry about. I'd rather you actually sit with it honestly than rush past it because it's uncomfortable to examine. You're not upset that I'm questioning this. I'm more worried you'd hide the question from me than that you're asking it, I said. But I want to be honest about something too. I've felt this way about you since long before any song ever played in your apartment. That's not new, and it's not a reaction to your broken engagement. If your answer, after really sitting with it, is that you need more time or something different than this entirely, I'll respect that completely. She was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I needed to hear you say that without getting defensive, she admitted. I think some part of me was testing whether you'd flinch if I questioned this out loud. You didn't. That told me more than any answer could have. A few days later, she showed up at my apartment, steadier this time, and told me she'd done the sitting with it she needed to do, and her answer hadn't changed. It had only gotten clearer. We never brought up that rough week again, though I think it did something necessary for both of us. It forced her to ask the hard question early instead of years down the line, and it forced me to answer without hedging. The first time I kissed her, we were in her apartment again, the same one where the song had first played, and she'd put it on again, this time not as a question, but as a choice, and I leaned in because the moment finally allowed it, because neither of us had a reason left to pretend the song meant anything less than it did. A year later, I proposed to her in the front seat of her car, parked on the exact stretch of highway upstate where we'd first sung that song badly together with the windows down. Holding a ring I'd been carrying around in my jacket pocket for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment to feel obvious instead of planned. "Why here?" she asked, laughing through tears already. "Because this is where the song actually started," I said. Seemed like the only place that made sense to ask. She said yes before I finished the question, then made me finish it anyway, because she wanted to hear the whole sentence. We got married the following spring, small ceremony, close friends only. Marcus stood up during the toasts and told the story of a 6-year-old playlist, of a song that had been quietly telling the truth long before either of us was brave enough to listen to it. Lily's mother spoke too, something I hadn't expected given how tense that one phone call had made things during our early months. She admitted, a little nervously, glass of champagne in hand, that she'd let her own fear of watching her daughter rush into something make her miss what was actually happening in front of her. "I saw 2 people who'd loved each other quietly for 6 years, she said, and I mistook the quiet for something safer than it actually was. I'm just grateful they didn't let my nerves talk them out of something real." Lily cried through that whole toast, and Marcus leaned over to me afterward and whispered that he'd told me so roughly a year in advance, which he has not once let me forget since. Lily walked down the aisle to that same song, the real version this time. No hesitation in her step, no unanswered questions sitting beside her. Connor sent a card, short and generous, wishing us both well in a way that told me he'd made genuine peace with how things had unfolded. I keep that card in a drawer I don't open often, but I know exactly where it is, the same way I know exactly which track number that song holds on a playlist neither of us has ever stopped adding to. These days, when people ask how we got together, Lily tells them the short version. "I helped him plan my wedding to someone else and picked our song by accident." When people ask what she means by accident, she smiles and says it wasn't really an accident at all. It was 6 years of truth finally getting tired of waiting to be said out loud. So tell me, if you were helping your best friend plan their wedding and they suddenly played the one song that belonged only to the 2 of you, would you have said something, or would you have let the moment pass quietly the way it had for years? And have you ever realized that the thing you'd been calling friendship for years was actually something you'd just been too scared to name? Tell me your story in the comments. If you like this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.